Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you, big deal for me. I never thought I'd be the type of person to air my family's dirty laundry on the internet. But here I am, sitting in my apartment at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except what happened tonight. My hands are still shaking as I type this. I need to get this out because if I don't, I think I might actually lose my mind. My name is Olivia, and 3 years ago, my daughter Sophia died. She was 7 years old, and she had acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the aggressive kind, the kind that requires intensive treatment, experimental drugs, and round-the-clock care that insurance companies love to deny coverage for. My husband Nathan and I did everything we could. We maxed out credit cards, took out loans, sold our car, and even started a GoFundMe that barely made a dent in the astronomical bills. We were drowning, watching our little girl suffer and begging anyone who would listen for help. I remember the day I called my parents, absolutely desperate. Sophia had been in the hospital for 2 months, and we just found out that the next phase of her treatment wasn't fully covered by insurance. We needed $45,000 and we needed it fast. I was crying so hard I could barely speak. My mom answered the phone, and I explained everything through sobs. I told her about the treatment, about how Sophia was so brave but so tired, about how the doctor said this could save her life. There was this long pause on the other end of the line. Then my mother said in that cool, measured voice of hers, "Olivia, you know, we're on a fixed income. Your father's retirement isn't what we hoped it would be. We simply don't have that kind of money to spare." I begged. I actually got on my knees in that hospital corridor and begged into the phone. I told her we'd pay them back, every cent with interest. I told her I'd sign over anything they wanted. I would have sold my soul to the devil himself if it meant saving Sophia. But my dad got on the phone and said the same thing. They were sorry. They wished they could help, but they just couldn't afford it. They suggested we look into medical bankruptcy, maybe talk to a social worker at the hospital. When I hung up that phone, something inside me broke, but I didn't have time to process it because Sophia needed me. Nathan and I ended up getting the money through a combination of his parents taking out a second mortgage, my boss giving me an advance on a year's salary, and a loan from a medical financing company with an interest rate that should be illegal. Sophia got her treatment. But it wasn't enough. 6 months later, my baby girl died in my arms, weighing less than 50 lbs, her hair long gone, her beautiful brown eyes still trying to smile at me, even as the life drained out of them. The last thing she said was, "I love you." Mommy, don't be sad. How do you move on from that? How do you wake up every morning knowing your child is gone? My sister Amanda, on the other hand, has 3 kids, Dylan, Chloe, and Logan, all healthy, all thriving, all attending Oak Ridge Prep, one of the most prestigious private schools in our state. Tuition there runs about $35,000 per year per child. Do the math. That's $105,000 annually. I knew Amanda and her husband Ryan did well. Ryan's a corporate lawyer, and Amanda manages a dental practice. They live in a beautiful house in the suburbs with a pool, take vacations to Europe, and drive matching Tesla SUVs. I didn't begrudge them their success. I really didn't. Even after Sophia died, when I could barely afford to keep the lights on because of our debt, I never resented Amanda's good fortune. We'd never been super close growing up, but she was still my sister. She sent a flower arrangement to Sophia's funeral, one of those generic ones from a website. She didn't stay long at the service, said the kids had soccer practice. For 3 years, I've been rebuilding my life. Nathan and I separated 18 months after Sophia died. Grief destroyed our marriage. We just couldn't look at each other without seeing her absence. The divorce was amicable, if devastatingly sad. We still talk, still support each other in our healing, but we couldn't stay married. The weight of loss was too heavy for us to carry together. I've been working 2 jobs to pay off the medical debt and the money we borrowed. Barely see my tiny apartment in daylight. I'm a husk of who I used to be, going through the motions, existing but not living. Therapy helps, but there's a hole in my chest that will never heal. Everyone says time makes it easier, but they're liars. Time just makes you better at pretending to be okay. 2 weeks ago, something happened that changed everything. I was having coffee with my old college roommate, Sarah, who happens to work in administration at Oak Ridge Prep. We hadn't seen each other in months. And she was catching me up on her life when she mentioned something in passing. "It's so wonderful that your parents are able to help Amanda with the tuition," she said, stirring her latte. "I processed the payment from their account just last week. It's such a blessing when grandparents can contribute to their grandchildren's education." I must have looked like I'd been struck by lightning because Sarah immediately looked concerned. "Olivia, are you okay?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The coffee shop started spinning around me. Sarah grabbed my hand across the table, asking me what was wrong, if I needed water, if I was going to be sick. Finally, I managed to choke out, "What do you mean, my parents' account?" That's when Sarah realized she'd revealed something I wasn't supposed to know. Her face went pale and she started backtracking, saying maybe she'd made a mistake. Maybe she was confused with another family. But I pressed her. I needed to know, after some hesitation and my promise that I wouldn't reveal how I'd found out. She told me the truth. My parents had been paying the full tuition for all 3 of Amanda's kids at Oak Ridge Prep for the past 4 years. Every semester, like clockwork, a check would arrive from their joint account. $105,000 every single year for 4 years. That's $420,000. Let that sink in. $420,000. For private school while my daughter died because they claimed they couldn't spare. $45,000 for her cancer treatment. I don't remember leaving the coffee shop. I don't remember driving home. I just remember sitting in my car outside my apartment building screaming until my throat was raw. I punched the steering wheel until my knuckles were bruised. Then I just sat there in silence, staring at nothing as the sun set and darkness filled the car. That night I didn't sleep. I went through every interaction with my parents over the past 7 years, reframing everything with this new, horrific knowledge. Every holiday where they gave Amanda's kids lavish gifts while I got a gift card. Every family gathering where they praised Amanda's parenting and made subtle digs about my choices. Every time I called them in desperation and they'd claimed poverty, they'd lied. While I was watching my daughter die, while I was selling everything I owned, while I was destroying my life and my marriage trying to save Sophia, they were writing checks for my sister's kids to go to a school with a climbing wall and a culinary arts program. For 2 weeks, I debated what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to call them and scream until they understood the magnitude of their betrayal. But another part of me, the part that was still their daughter despite everything, wanted to believe there was some explanation, some reason that would make this make sense, even though I knew deep down there wasn't one. During those 2 weeks, I became obsessed with piecing together the timeline. I pulled out old bank statements, medical bills, anything that could help me understand when exactly my parents had started funding Amanda's perfect life while watching mine crumble. I created a spreadsheet because apparently grief and rage had turned me into someone who documents betrayal in Excel. The first tuition payment from my parents to Oak Ridge Prep was made in August. 7 years ago. I know this because I did more digging, called in favors, and maybe crossed some ethical lines I'm not proud of. August, 7 years ago. Sophia was diagnosed in June of that year. By August, we were already drowning in medical bills, already starting to panic about how we'd afford her treatment. That means my parents made the conscious decision to commit over $100,000 a year to private school tuition within 2 months of Sophia's diagnosis. They knew she was sick. They knew we were struggling, and they chose to write those checks anyway. I started having panic attacks during those 2 weeks. I'd be at work stocking shelves at the grocery store where I work my second job, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I'd have to lock myself in the bathroom, sitting on the floor trying to remember the breathing exercises my therapist taught me. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, out through the mouth for 8. But no breathing exercise could calm the rage that was building inside me like a pressure cooker about to explode. I also started remembering things I'd blocked out, things my brain had protected me from during the worst of my grief, like the time my father had lectured me about financial responsibility, suggesting that maybe Nathan and I had been living beyond our means, implying that our money troubles were somehow our own fault. This was while Sophia was in treatment, while we were selling everything we owned and he knew it. He looked me in the eye and essentially blamed us for our financial ruin. all while writing massive checks for Amanda's kids. I remembered Sophia's last birthday party, the one right before she got too sick for celebrations. We'd had it at our apartment because we couldn't afford anything else. It was just family, a homemade cake and a few presents we'd scraped together money for. Amanda had shown up late, complained about the parking, and left early because Logan had a tennis lesson. A tennis lesson at a country club my parents also paid a membership for. I later discovered my parents had given Sophia a $50 savings bond for her birthday, $50, and I'd been grateful for it, because $50 was $50 meanwhile. I later learned they'd given each of Amanda's kids new iPads that same month, top-of-the-line models that cost $800 each. But Sophia got a savings bond she'd never live long enough to cash. Memories just kept coming, each one a fresh knife wound. Family dinners where Amanda casually mentioned the kids' school trips to Costa Rica and France, trips that cost thousands of dollars, trips my parents had funded. Christmas mornings where Amanda's kids opened piles of expensive gifts, while Sophia got a few small things, and I'd been grateful even for that. Every family gathering where my financial struggles were treated like a shameful secret, while Amanda's affluence was celebrated. I thought about the times I called my mother crying about how we couldn't afford Sophia's anti-nausea medication that insurance wouldn't cover. How my mother had suggested I look into patient assistance programs, maybe talk to a social worker, perhaps try generic alternatives. All reasonable suggestions except she was making them while she had the means to simply write a check that would have solved the problem instantly. There was this one moment I couldn't stop thinking about. Sophia had lost all her hair from the chemo, and she was devastated. She was only 7, and she was so self-conscious about it. There was this beautiful wig we'd found online, made of real hair that looked exactly like her natural curls. It cost $300. We couldn't afford it. Sophia wore cheap synthetic wigs that made her scalp itch and made her cry because they didn't look real. Kids at school during the brief period she could attend would stare at her. I had mentioned it to my mother once in passing during a phone call. I wasn't even asking for money, just venting about how hard it was to see Sophia so unhappy with her appearance on top of everything else she was dealing with. My mother had made sympathetic noises and said nothing else about it. The wig never materialized, but Amanda's daughter, Chloe, got a $500 American Girl doll collection that same month, a gift from her grandparents for making the honor roll. During those 2 weeks of discovery, I also reached out to Nathan's parents, Karen and David. They'd been the ones who took out a second mortgage on their modest home to help us pay for Sophia's treatment. They'd never been wealthy, both retired teachers living on pensions, but they'd done whatever they could. I met Karen for lunch and told her what I discovered. She sat there in silence for a long time after I finished talking, her face going through a range of emotions I couldn't quite read. Finally, she said, "Olivia, I want you to know something. When we took out that mortgage, we called your parents. We thought if we all pulled our resources together, we could cover everything Sophia needed without putting such a massive burden on any one family." My heart stopped. "You called them?" "David did," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "He called your father, explained what we were doing, and asked if they could contribute anything at all. Even a few thousand would have helped. Do you know what your father said?" I couldn't speak, could only shake my head. "He said they wished they could help, but they'd already overextended themselves helping Amanda with some home renovations and couldn't take on any more financial obligations." Karen reached across the table and gripped my hand. "Olivia, we didn't tell you because you were already carrying so much. We didn't want to add to your burden, but yes, your parents refused to help. Even when we were literally mortgaging our home. Home renovations. They told Nathan's parents they couldn't help because of home renovations." I later drove past Amanda's house and saw the addition they'd put on that year. A massive family room with floor-to-ceiling windows. My parents hadn't just paid for it. My father had bragged about it at a family gathering, about how he was so happy he could help his daughter expand her home for her growing family. The rage I felt in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was pure, white-hot, and all-consuming. I had to pull over on the drive home because my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't steer. I called my therapist's emergency line and spent an hour talking her down from what she gently described as a completely understandable crisis response. I also started digging into the GoFundMe we'd set up for Sophia. I hadn't looked at it in years because it was too painful, but I forced myself to go through every donation, every comment, every share. The thing that struck me was how many people had given what they could. Nathan's coworkers, people from Sophia's school, neighbors, even strangers who'd heard about her story. There were donations of $5 from people who clearly didn't have $5 to spare. $20 here, $50 there, each one accompanied by prayers and well wishes. My parents had donated $200 to the GoFundMe, $200, with a public comment about how they were praying for their granddaughter and wished they could do more, $200 while they were writing checks for $35,000 per child per semester. The hypocrisy was staggering, but Amanda hadn't donated anything. Not 1 cent. I had excused it at the time, telling myself she was busy with her kids, that she was probably helping in other ways I didn't see. But now I knew the truth. She'd been too busy enjoying the money that should have saved my daughter's life to contribute even a token amount to her niece's cancer fund. I spent hours reading through the messages of support from strangers on that GoFundMe page, crying over the kindness of people who never even met Sophia. An elderly woman on a fixed income had donated $50 with a note that said, "I remember when my grandson was sick, no child should suffer. Praying for your sweet girl." A teenager had donated their birthday money, $25, because they had read Sophia's story and wanted to help. These strangers, these people with no obligation to us whatsoever, had scraped together what they could while my parents sat on hundreds of thousands of dollars and said no. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Quick note before we dive deeper. Share in the comments how your day's going and where you're watching from. Let's see who's out there today. Then yesterday, I got a text in the family group chat from my mom. "Sunday dinner at our house. Amanda and the kids will be there. We haven't all been together in so long. Please come, Olivia. It would mean so much to your father and me." I stared at that text for a long time. Then I replied, "I'll be there." Nathan thought I was crazy when I told him what I was planning. We met for coffee because I needed someone to talk to. Someone who understood the depth of this betrayal because he'd lived it too. When I explained what I discovered and what I intended to do, he was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, his eyes full of that familiar grief we shared. "Once you say these things, you cannot take them back." "Good," I said. "I don't want to take them back." He nodded slowly, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Sophia would be proud of you for standing up for yourself. For standing up for her." That made me cry right there in the coffee shop because he was right. Sophia was always so brave, so willing to fight. She never backed down, never gave up, even when her tiny body was failing her. I owed it to her memory to be just as brave. So today I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs, the same house I grew up in, with a big oak tree in the front yard and the garden my mother obsesses over. Amanda's Tesla was already in the driveway along with my parents' sedan. I sat in my beat-up Honda for a few minutes, gathering my courage, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I walked in without knocking. Sunday dinners were always casual. Family just letting themselves in. I could hear laughter coming from the dining room, could smell my mother's pot roast, could hear my nieces and nephew chattering excitedly about something. For a moment, just a brief, painful moment, I remembered when Sophia would have been part of that noise, her high-pitched giggle mixing with her cousins' voices. When I walked into the dining room, everyone looked up. My mother smiled. That practiced, perfect hostess smile. "Olivia, we're so glad you could make it. We're just about to sit down." Amanda was helping set the table, looking effortlessly put together in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. "Hey-o, long time no see." My father was already seated at the head of the table, and he nodded at me. "Hello, sweetheart." The kids were in the living room glued to their iPads. Not even noticing my arrival, I looked at them, these healthy, privileged children, and thought about Sophia, about how she'd loved to draw, how she'd wanted to be a veterinarian, how she'd never complained, even when the chemotherapy made her so sick she couldn't move. "Let's eat," my mother said. carrying the pot roast to the table. "Everyone sit down." I took my usual seat, the one I'd sat in for family dinners since childhood. I found out my parents had secretly been paying for my sister's kids' private school while refusing to help with my daughter's cancer treatment. She didn't make it today. I finally confronted them at dinner, and the table exploded. Amanda sat across from me, my parents on either end of the table. The kids eventually wandered in, took their seats, and dinner began. It was so normal, so perfectly ordinary that for a moment, I questioned whether I was really going to do this. My mother served the food, asking everyone about their weeks. Amanda talked about Chloe's soccer tournament and Dylan's science fair project. My dad mentioned something about golf. They asked me how work was going, and I gave vague one-word answers. The food tasted like ash in my mouth. "Olivia, you seem quiet," my mother observed in that way she had of making an observation sound like a criticism. "Is everything all right?" This was it, the moment I'd been planning for. I set down my fork and looked directly at her. "Actually, Mom, I have something I need to talk to you all about." The table got quiet. Amanda looked at me with mild curiosity. My dad paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. The kids continued eating, oblivious. "I had coffee with Sarah Cooper a couple of weeks ago," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. "You remember Sarah, my roommate from college?" My mother nodded slowly, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "She works at Oak Ridge Prep now. In administration." I turned to Amanda. "That's where your kids go to school, right?" "Really prestigious place. Must cost a fortune." Amanda glanced at our parents, then back at me. "Yes, it's a wonderful school. We're very fortunate." "You are?" I agreed. "It's about $35,000 a year per child, isn't it? So for 3 kids, that's over $100,000 annually." "Olivia, what's this about?" my father asked, his voice taking on a warning tone. I ignored him, my eyes still on Amanda. "Sarah mentioned something interesting," she said. "Mom and Dad have been paying the tuition, all of it, for all 3 kids for the past 4 years. The silence that fell over the table was deafening. Amanda's face went pale, then red. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish. My father set down his fork with a clatter. Mom started, but I held up my hand. "Do you remember 7 years ago when Sophia was sick? When she needed treatment that insurance wouldn't cover? When I called you, literally on my knees in a hospital corridor, begging for help." My voice was shaking now, but I pushed forward. "Do you remember what you told me?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Olivia, please. You said you were on a fixed income. You said you didn't have that kind of money. You suggested I look into bankruptcy." I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. "I needed $45,000 to save my daughter's life, and you told me you couldn't afford it. But you could afford $105,000 a year for Amanda's kids to go to private school." "It's not that simple," my father said, his face reddening. "The situations were different." "Different how?" I demanded. "Please explain to me how paying for private school is more important than saving your granddaughter's life." "I'm dying to understand this reasoning." Amanda found her voice. "Olivia, I didn't know about this, I swear. I thought Mom and Dad were just helping a little bit." "Don't lie," I snapped. "You knew exactly where that money was coming from. You knew they were paying the full tuition. And you said nothing, even at Sophia's funeral. You said nothing." "That's not fair," Amanda protested. "I didn't know the details of what happened with Sophia's treatment because you never asked." I was standing now, my chair scraping back. "You never once asked how we were managing, how we were paying for anything. You were too busy enjoying your perfect life with your healthy kids and your Tesla and your European vacations." "Olivia, sit down," my father ordered. "You're upsetting the children." I looked at my nieces and nephew, who were staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. Part of me felt bad for scaring them, but the larger part of me, the part that had died with Sophia, didn't care. "I'm upsetting the children," I repeated incredulously. "I watched my child die because you chose a private school education over her life." I held her while she took her last breath, knowing we'd done everything we could, never knowing that you had the money to help us all along. "Do you have any idea what that did to me?" what it did to Nathan. Our marriage ended because of the grief and the financial ruin. I lost everything, including myself. My mother was crying now, mascara running down her face. We thought it was too risky, she sobbed. The doctor said there were no guarantees. The treatment might not work, at least with the school. We knew the money would be used well. Used well? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You gambled on my daughter's life because there were no guarantees. Every medical treatment is a risk, Mom, but she was 7 years old and fighting for her life. She deserved a chance. You need to calm down, my father said, standing up now too. We made the decision we thought was best. Amanda's children needed private school more than Sophia needed to live. Say it? I want to hear you say it. I was crying now too, years of grief and rage pouring out of me. Tell me that your other grandchildren's education was more important than Sophia's life. That's not what we're saying, Amanda interjected. Olivia, you're twisting everything. Am I? I turned on her. Then please untwist it for me. Explain how this makes sense. Explain how you can live with yourselves, any of you. My mother was shaking her head, reaching out toward me. Olivia, please, we love you. We loved Sophia. We thought we were making the right choice. You thought about yourselves, I said flatly. You thought about appearances, about Amanda's perfect family, about being the grandparents who could afford to send their grandkids to the best schools. You didn't think about Sophia struggling to breathe, her little body full of poison trying to kill the cancer. You didn't think about me, your daughter, falling apart piece by piece. We couldn't afford both, my father said. And there it was, the truth finally spoken aloud. We had already committed to helping Amanda with the school. We couldn't afford both. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Amanda looked stricken. My mother collapsed back into her chair, and I felt something inside me finally, completely break apart. You chose, I said quietly. You had to choose. And you chose Amanda's children over mine. You chose private school over life itself. Sophia was going to die anyway, my father said, and I swear time stopped. The doctors gave her a 30% chance, even with the treatment. It would have been throwing money away. The sound that came out of me wasn't quite human. Amanda gasped. My mother let out a small shriek, and my father, realizing what he'd said, tried to backtrack. I didn't mean Olivia. That came out wrong. Get away from me, I said, backing toward the door. All of you, stay away from me. Olivia, please, my mother begged, trying to come toward me. Let us explain. You just did, I said. You explained everything perfectly. Sophia's life was a bad investment. Amanda's kids' education was worth more. 30% odds weren't good enough for you to take a chance on your own granddaughter. I looked at each of them, memorizing their faces, knowing this was the last time I'd see them as family. You know what the worst part is? Sophia loved you, even in the hospital. Even when she was in pain, she'd ask about you. She'd want to video chat with Grandma and Grandpa. She made you drawings that you probably threw away. She never knew that her own grandparents valued her less than private school tuition. That's not true, my mother wept. We loved her. Love is a verb, I said. It's not just a feeling, it's actions. And your actions showed me exactly where Sophia ranked in your priorities. Dead last. I turned to Amanda, who was crying quietly, her perfect composure finally cracked. I hope your kids enjoy their fancy school. I hope they appreciate the sacrifice that paid for it, even if they never know what it cost. Dylan, the oldest at 13, had been watching everything with growing horror. Aunt Olivia, we didn't know. I know. Buddy, I said, my voice softening just a fraction for him. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. But maybe ask your mother and your grandparents why your cousin Sophia isn't here anymore. Ask them about choices and priorities. I walked out of that house, and I haven't looked back. My phone has been ringing nonstop, but I blocked all their numbers. Amanda tried to come to my apartment, but I threatened to call the police. I don't care about their explanations or their justifications. There's nothing they can say that will make this right. The day after the confrontation, I woke up feeling strangely empty. Not better, not worse, just hollow. I called in sick to both my jobs because I physically couldn't move from my bed. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from that dinner over and over in my mind. Sophia was going to die anyway. My father's words kept echoing in my head like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Around noon, there was pounding on my door. I ignored it at first, but it didn't stop finally. I dragged myself up and looked through the peephole. It was Amanda, and she looked terrible. Her perfect hair was a mess. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she was still in what looked like pajamas. "Olivia, please," she called through the door. "Please, just let me explain. Let me talk to you." "Go away." "Amanda," I said, not even opening the door. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear to God, I didn't know the full extent of it. I thought they were just helping a little, not paying for everything. And I didn't know they'd refuse to help with Sophia. I swear I didn't know." "You're a liar," I said flatly. "You had to know. You had to know you weren't paying those tuition bills yourself. You had to know where the money was coming from." "Ryan and I were paying some of it," she insisted. "I thought Mom and Dad were just supplementing, maybe a third or something." I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. "Olivia, please believe me, but I couldn't believe her. I wouldn't. Because even if she hadn't known the exact amounts, she'd known our parents were giving her substantial financial help while I was drowning. She'd known Sophia was sick, known we were struggling, and she'd never once questioned the disparity. She'd been content to take and take and take while her niece died. "Even if I believe you," I said through the door, "it doesn't change anything. You saw me suffering. You saw what losing Sophia did to me. You came to her funeral in your designer clothes and left early for soccer practice. You never once asked if we needed help. You never offered. You just kept taking from them while I had nothing." "I'm sorry," she wept. "Olivia, I'm so sorry. I didn't think—" "That's the problem, Amanda. You didn't think about anyone but yourself and your perfect family." I pressed my hand against the door, feeling the physical barrier between us. "Leave if you don't leave right now." "I'm calling the police." I heard her crying on the other side of the door for another minute before she finally left. I sank down to the floor, my back against the door, and sat there until it got dark. The texts started coming from my mother's number. Even though I'd blocked her, she was using different phones trying to get through to me. Each message was a variation of the same thing. "Please talk to us. We can explain. We love you. This is all a misunderstanding." I read them all with a sense of detached numbness, then deleted them without responding. My father tried a different approach. He called my work, both places, trying to get me to talk to him. My manager at the grocery store, a kind woman named Jennifer, took the message and then pulled me aside. "Your father called," she said gently. "He seems pretty desperate to talk to you. Is everything okay?" "Family stuff," I said, not wanting to get into it. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't put any calls from him through to me anymore." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I'll make a note, but Olivia, if you need time off, if you need anything, you let me know, okay?" I almost broke down right there in the middle of the store, but I held it together, barely. 3 days after the confrontation, I got an email from Amanda, a long, rambling email that started with more apologies and excuses, but then took a turn I didn't expect. She wrote about how she confronted our parents herself, how there had been another huge fight, how our father had admitted they'd made a choice and stuck with it because they couldn't back out of their commitment to the grandchildren's education. She wrote that our mother had defended their decision by saying they thought the money would be wasted on Sophia because her prognosis was so poor and that at least with the school they could see tangible results. Amanda said she'd been horrified by this admission, that she told them they were wrong, that they'd made a monstrous decision. But then at the end of the email, Amanda wrote something that made my blood boil. I'd asked them to stop paying the tuition. I told them we'd figure out how to afford it ourselves or we'd transfer the kids to public school. But Olivia, they're our parents. They made a mistake, a terrible one. But they're still our family. Maybe in time you can find it in your heart to forgive them for your own peace. If nothing else, I read that email 3 times. Each time getting angrier, she wanted me to forgive them. She thought stopping the tuition payments now, 7 years too late, would somehow make things right. She still didn't get it. None of them did. I wrote back. It was the only communication I'd sent to any of them since the dinner. I kept it short. Amanda, you say they made a mistake? Mistakes are accidents. Mistakes are errors in judgment made in the heat of the moment. What they did was make a calculated, deliberate choice. They chose your children's private education over my child's life. They chose to lie to my face while my daughter died. That's not a mistake. That's a betrayal so fundamental, so cruel that there's no coming back from it. Don't contact me again. I sent it and blocked her email address. 2, Nathan called me after I texted him that it was done. He didn't say much, just asked if I was okay and if I needed anything. Then he said, Sophia's medical fund, the GoFundMe. How much did it raise? About $12,000, I said. Why? And how much did you say your parents have spent on Amanda's kids' schooling? For $20,000 over 4 years. There was a long pause. Olivia, I think we should talk to a lawyer. I hadn't thought about legal action. But Nathan was right. There might be a case here, especially given that my parents explicitly refused to help while having the means to do so, causing Nathan and me severe financial hardship. I'm meeting with an attorney tomorrow to explore options, not because I think money will fix anything, but because they need to face consequences for their choice. People keep asking me if I feel better after the confrontation. If I got closure, the truth is, I don't feel better. I feel hollow. I feel like I'm mourning my family all over again, just like I mourned Sophia. But I also feel like I finally told the truth, like I finally stood up for my daughter, even though it's too late for her. Tonight I went to Sophia's grave. I haven't been in a while because it hurts too much, but I needed to tell her what I'd done. I sat there in the dark next to her small headstone with a butterfly engraving she would have loved, and I talked to her. I told her about the confrontation, about the truth, about how I'd finally made them acknowledge what they'd done. I'd like to think she heard me. I'd like to think she knows that her mother fought for her, even if it came too late. I placed fresh flowers on her grave, the yellow daisies she loved, and I promised her that I'd keep fighting, not just for justice, but to make sure her memory means something. If you're reading this and you have children or grandchildren or anyone you claim to love, please remember this. Love isn't just words, it's choices, it's sacrifice. It's standing up for the people who need you, even when it's hard, even when it's expensive, even when the odds aren't in your favor. My parents had a choice and they chose wrong. They chose comfort over crisis, appearances over action, safety over sacrifice, and now they have to live with that choice. Just like I have to live with the loss of my daughter, and the knowledge that she might have had a better chance if the people who were supposed to love her had actually shown up when she needed them the most. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll ever speak to my parents or Amanda again. I don't know if legal action will lead anywhere. All I know is that I told the truth. I faced them and I didn't back down. For Sophia, I didn't back down. That's all I have left to give her now, the truth and the knowledge that someone fought for her, even if it came too late to matter. Rest in peace, my sweet girl. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube, this video deserves to blow up. When family chooses appearances over saving a life, like Olivia's parents did while Sophia fought cancer, do you confront the truth or stay silent? Share in the comments, drop a like if this story broke your heart, hit subscribe, and smash the hype button to tell YouTube this needs to go viral. Keep the surprises coming.